Hi, Rich Leiter here. Welcome to my channel. I haven't been doing a lot of videos lately because I've been working on finishing a book of mine, and when I do that, I just can concentrate on one thing at a time. So the book is finished now, and it will be out soon, published, and when it is, I'll speak more about that. What I want to talk about now is, it's not going to be a very long talk, but it's going to be a very unorthodox one, I guess. Man is very used to dividing things up, categorizing everything, classifying everything. It gives man a sense of control, a sense of order. It gives man the illusion, which is very comforting to him, that he knows something. For instance, say Freud. Freud had his concepts of the id and the superego and the ego. He also had, those are three things. So he's already categorized life, or divided life up into those three things. And then, of course, there are more things. There's the eros and thanatos, the death drive. He has a whole bunch of sublimation and the unconscious and the subconscious. So he kind of takes life, not really life, that's not really the right word. He takes whatever we find ourselves in right now, and he wants to give it meaning according to him. It's almost as if there's this vast endless tundra or field, rolling plains, and somehow man can't seem to tolerate just enjoying that ever rolling plain. He feels that he has to divvy it up, he has to parcel it up, have little parcels of meaning. Freud does it in his style. Religion divvies up that endless tundra or rolling plain in its own fashion. The most obvious one would be that, we're men and women, we're mortal, we're here, and then there's God up there. So right away, you've divided that endless rolling plain into two things now, us and the guy upstairs. So when we do that, when we classify things like this and subdivide things, as I say, it gives us a sense of comfort. And of course, not only do we subdivide things between us, the mortals, and God above, but if you're a Christian, then you believe that Catholicism, you have the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So now you've got three things. Then you also have the orders of angels. You have the cherubim and you have the seraphim, and I don't know how many other orders of angels you have. You have that. And then you have heaven, and you have hell, and you have purgatory. And so you have this whole, out of this emptiness, this nothingness, this untouched, virgin, pristine nothingness, that whatever this is. So you see how religion has already divided it up into all these complicated subdivisions. I'm not putting down religion. I'm just saying religion. The field of religion is one obvious way in which man loves to divide things up. He feels that it is answering all the unanswerable questions when he does this. Psychology, well, we just mentioned Freud. Take your pick of all the psychologists out there with all of their different theories. We have Jung and his archetypes. So there's the archetypes. That's already a subcategory, and he's got a whole bunch of synchronicity. He's got a whole bunch of concepts. He's dividing the land up into his particular style of parcels of land. And of course, philosophers, if take your pick. I mean, every one of them divides whatever we're in right now into their own fashion. Every one of them. Plato immediately comes to mind. Plato has the idea of the Platonic form. Well, what is the Platonic form? Again, it's kind of we're here, we mere mortals, and then there's this idealized form which we can never reach. In a way, Nietzsche very brilliantly said that Platonism is simply it was a pagan form, a pre-Christian form of Christianity. In other words, the concept is the same in Christianity as it is in Platonism. I mean, we're here, and the Platonic form is there, or if you want to call it, the Holy Trinity is up there, or God is up there. But again, there's this duality. It's kind of the same thing. And ever since, the pre-Socratics, they divided the world up as they saw. Earth, wind, fire, water, Parmenides, and Heraclitus, and of course, ever since every philosopher ever since then. So you take your poison, whatever you want. Everything is intricately subdivided. I mean, that's immediately apparent to me. There was a Polish writer by the name of Witold Gombrowicz, and he stated in one of his journals something to the effect that man is born in chaos, but from the moment he is born, he tries ceaselessly to carve form out of that chaos. It's just a deep, deep drive that man has. And this is what I'm talking about. Mankind likes to divide the unknowable up. He likes to devise systems so that the unknowable becomes knowable. Of course, it never does become knowable because these are all illusory kinds of knowledge. It only gives man comfort as long as he forgets the fact that he is devising all of these systems. Man is a mere mortal. Man is not infallible. Man is prone to error all of the time. And he forgets because he's so enamored with all of these systems that he devises through the centuries that they are all devised by men. Fallible men. So we have to step back a bit, and we have to remind ourselves that all of these systems in every one of these fields of endeavor, whether it be physics, astrophysics, religion, psychology, you name it, that all of these systems were devised by man, artificially devised by him. The moment you forget this, man becomes very smug and very pleased with himself. But the moment you remember that fallible man devised them, they all fall apart, don't they? So what I'm saying is, what would happen if we all remembered that every system in every field of endeavor devised by man is recognized for what it is? A fallible system built on clay feet. Once you realize that, and you take all of these systems away. I'm thinking of another one. The Bible. God created the heavens and the earth. You have two things now, and created them in 6 days, I think. And on the seventh day he rested. So already you have days now. You have 7 days. You have the earth, and you have the heavens. Everything is being subdivided, and there is this notion of time also, which is a kind of a subdivision. So what I'm saying is, if we were to recognize that all of these systems were merely devised by man, I personally believe, I'm sure that many people would argue with me, but many people think that the Bible is divine. It's divinely inspired. To my point of view, it was written by men. It was written by fallible men. And if you accept that notion that everything that man devises, everything, is fallible and is artificial, and if you take all that away, what are you left with? Well, you're left with, you can't even say you're left with life. That's too confining a term. You're left with whatever this is. Whatever this is. And what is this? It's one thing. It's just one thing. It's not subdivided yet. And that one thing, therefore, has got to be the true thing, because it hasn't been meddled with or interfered with yet by mortal man. So there's only one thing, whatever that thing is. It never begins and it never ends. We don't know what it is, because mortal man doesn't even have an understanding of eternity. We have no understanding. We use the word and we think we grasp the concept, but man cannot. Man is finite. Everything that man can grasp is finite. It's within the context of being a human being, which is finite. But eternity is not finite, and eternity is not human. So man doesn't know what eternity is either. We're in this, whatever it is, with no beginning and no end. And there's really nothing else that can be said about it. This is why I like what Gombrowicz has to say about man being born in chaos. In other words, the chaos is just this unknowable thing that we find ourselves in that's not classifiable. And Gombrowicz seems to be very much in touch with that. And this is a notion which, the more older I get, the more enormously it appeals to me. Now, there are two ways of dealing, I think, with whatever this is. Again, you can't even divide whatever this is into life and death. Again, the moment you do that, you're artificially destroying that oneness, that unity, before man put his grubby little hands on it. If you ask a physiologist or a doctor what death is, well, he'll tell you it's the absence of electrical impulses in the brain, and the heart stops pumping blood. But that doesn't really explain anything. That's just an observation, but it doesn't explain what death is. No man knows what death is. No man. Even Lazarus in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, when Lazarus came back from the dead, Lazarus didn't have anything to say about the experience of death. There's a very, very interesting story by a Russian novelist at the turn of the 20th century, Leonid Andreyev. And Leonid Andreyev wrote a story called Lazarus. And in this story, Lazarus comes back from the dead, and everybody wants to know, the emperor of Rome wants to know, everybody's clamoring to know what death is like. And they say, come on, Lazarus, spill the beans. And Lazarus is wondrously silent on the subject. He just kind of looks at his questioners and says to them, with 1,000-yard stare in his eyes, dull eyes that show no sign of life, he just says, I was dead. That's it. I guess when he has tasted of eternity, of the things which man is not destined to know while on the earth, I guess it must do something to you. In this story, as I remember it, Lazarus just can't seem to fit in to life now that he has come back to it. He's out of place. Nothing makes any difference to him anymore once he has tasted eternity. So he's very much out of place here. Excuse me. And I think the implication is he never should have been raised to begin with. Now, this notion of a oneness before man has gotten to it and started categorizing it and subdividing it. I've heard this often recently by other people. This is not an original thought of mine, but it also strikes me. When a baby is born, the baby has no sense of itself. The baby doesn't think to itself, I'm Richard Leiter, or I'm John Doe, or I'm Harry Kingston III. No, the baby is just pure consciousness without thought yet. It looks around at whatever this is, and it doesn't see itself as being separate and distinct from everything else. It sees itself as a part of it, because it hasn't begun thinking yet. Now, of course, very, very shortly after it is born, the baby develops what's commonly known as an ego, or a sense of itself. A sense of itself being separate and distinct from everything else out there. So now with the ego, there's everything out there, but there's also a me. Me versus it. Me and it. And once that happens, it kind of stays that way until the day we die. This notion of an ego, of developing an ego, is very, very important for psychologists, for Freud in particular, with his subdivision of the id and the ego and the superego. Freud says in order to balance the libidinous drives of the id and the superego, the guilt over those libidinous drives of the superego, the way that you're able to manage the two, balance the two, is by having a strong ego. If you're able to have a strong ego, you will be able to successfully navigate life. However, if your ego is weak, or if your ego is crushed or succumbs to maybe some traumatic event or whatever, in chemical imbalance in your brain, whatever it is, if the ego goes and there's no mediator called the ego, well then, the person, according to Freud anyway, will slip into psychosis. He will slip into hallucination. He will become mentally ill. So we are told and encouraged to develop a very strong ego. That is the sign of health in our society. Now, curiously, our society is an extremely toxic, hypocritical one. It's just we just live in a very, very sick world. And many people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, some younger, recognize just how toxic this system is. and they want out of it in some way. Some of them turn to religion, or some of them get their comfort from religion. Others seek Eastern meditation, Eastern philosophy. And of course, the tenet, I think this is kind of common knowledge, one of the chief tenets of Eastern philosophy, of any kind of yoga, is that you are supposed to abandon or purge yourself of the ego. So the thing that we tried so hard to do in our Western European civilization, to strengthen your ego, now becomes an obstacle to you if you want to practice Eastern philosophy. And it's not that easy, I understand, to overcome one's ego, to overcome the notion that there's me and then there's everything else. Apparently, this is what people spend decades doing, studying under some guru, trying to get rid of that ego. So it's this notion of an ego, of a duality, shall we say, between there's now a me, an ego, and there's this formless, never-ending chaos, the true nature of things. There's this duality now. Now, this is another very, very crucial point. There are two ways of looking at this, whatever it is, this chaos that we're floating in. One way is the acquisition of knowledge, reading books, studying philosophy, thinking. This is the way of Western European civilization. This is considered to be a virtue. The more you know, the better. And of course, the more you know, the more you need to know. And now you know more, well, you can still learn more. And this keeps going on until the day you die. I'm sure we've all heard somebody say to us at one point or another, there's no end to knowledge, young man or young woman. So it's the never-ending pursuit of knowledge, the never-ending pursuit of some final enlightenment. We are all seeking it when you go this route by studying. You're hoping to find some final understanding which will then obviate the need to look any further. But of course, we never find that using this method, because no matter how much you study, you still need to study, and you still need to read, and you still need to think. And there's always one more hill beyond the horizon, and there's another hill. Now, curiously enough, this is considered a great virtue in our society. This never-ending quest for knowledge. If you're that kind of a person, people will pat you on the back and say, "Good for you, good for you. You're a seeker. That's great." This is a very positive thing. So in a way, it's kind of like having a carrot, the carrot of possible enlightenment, dangled in front of the nose of the donkey, which is us. And so the donkey keeps on going and going and going, always thinking that it's finally going to eat the carrot. And of course it never does. And it just goes that way until it drops. This is the way that I grew up. And I would wager to say that this is probably the way that 99.9999% of all of you grew up. Now, I've gotten to the point in my life, I'm 71 now, I've gotten to the point in my life after having read books and studied and still listen to people talk about philosophy and so on. I've gotten to the point where I realized that enlightenment, the final frontier, is never going to happen for me. It hasn't happened up to now, and it ain't going to. And I'm good with that. I'm good with that. And once you begin to realize that, sometimes you can't really realize it until you spend a lifetime going this knowledge route. And I have. I'm 71 now. And, I mean, it hasn't been a bad thing. I mean, I've learned I have a lot of ideas floating around in my head about philosophy and about Freud and about this. I mean, I have a lot of subdivisions, a lot of little parcels of land floating around in my head, which is interesting. You know, makes for good talk at cocktail parties and so on. But, you know, has it given me that final overpowering, shattering awareness that obviates the need for any further seeking? Hell no. And I'm pretty much convinced that it never will. And like I say, I'm good with that. I mean, I know certain things in a practical sense. It's not as if I don't know anything. I mean, you know, I've had many years of therapy, different kinds of therapy, you know, psychotherapy. And I know now that there are, for instance, there's one practical thing. I know now that if a certain person you meet doesn't like you or is not going to give you anything emotionally, that you ought not to struggle with that person, that it's just fruitless to do that. I didn't know that when I was younger. I do now. And so I know to keep away from such a person. So I do know certain practical things, as we all do. But I'm talking about a more abstract form of knowledge, that ultimate knowledge, as I say, that obviates the need for searching anymore. So I don't have it. I'm not going to get it. Then, of course, there's the other route. And this is the route I just described to you of the never-ending quest for knowledge. This is the Western route. And then there's the Eastern route. Now, the Eastern route is very different. Like I say, the Eastern route doesn't think very much of the ego. And the Eastern route doesn't think very much of knowledge or of thinking or of thoughts. To the Eastern way of thinking, knowledge and thinking and thoughts are just the things which kind of clutter your mind and keep your ego fixed and in place. And so it doesn't think very highly of it. And as a matter of fact, by always searching for that next bit of knowledge that might be the final bit that you need to reach enlightenment, by always looking into the future, it really is kind of destructive from the Eastern point of view, because it prevents a person from actually relishing and cherishing the very moment that we're living in. I mean, the past is gone. It's an illusion. It doesn't exist. And the future is unknowable. We don't know what the future is. We only have the now. And by constantly focusing on the future, on some unknowable future when we can attain perfect wisdom and enlightenment, it just prevents us from just treasuring the moment we have right now. And so in the East End, I'm becoming more and more sympathetic to this way of thinking, to this way of being. This way of being, to me anyway, would seem to indicate that you're never going to know, you're never going to reach that kind of enlightenment you are seeking for, you are searching for. So stop searching for it. The very act of searching will ensure that you will never find it. Better it is to get rid of all that and just say, what I know now, what I am now, what this is now, what my ignorance of whatever this is now, this is it. And this is all that there is. And just stay with that. It's not a philosophy. It's just, there's nothing to know, because the knowing is illusory. It never ends. Every step of the way leads to another step, and therefore each step is in itself incomplete. And the only way you can be complete is to say enough of that. This is it. This is complete. And I think when you begin to do that, you become more in touch again with this, whatever this is, before man has begun subdividing it into his various fallible categories. And so I'm very sympathetic to this way of thinking more and more. And I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Thank you.